So you got your very first lens with an aperture that can go all the way down to 1.8 or even lower and give you that really nice shallow depth of field. But just because you can use that, should you? Hey everyone, Camber here, back with you, and today I want to talk about choosing an aperture setting that's going to help to better tell your story. And if you're new here, this channel is all about teaching you how to use your camera to make good videos, so consider subscribing. Now, having that shallow depth of field is a great way to make your videos stand out and look more professional, and it can really help to draw your viewers' eyes to certain parts of the frame with being able to control the focus. However, in filmmaking, variety is a very important part, and you don't want to be doing the exact same thing for every one of your shots. And so what I want to do today is look through some clips of movies and see how the choice in aperture helps to enhance the stories. We're going to start by looking at scenes using a wider aperture in order to get a shallower depth of field. In this first scene, the Avengers are being shown clips of destruction they caused while they're attempting to save the world, and then we move to a shot showing each of their reactions. As you can see here, there's a shallow depth of field used, however it's not so shallow that you can't see anything in the background, and this allows us to see each of their reactions as we shift focus from one character to the next, but still being able to see what's going on around them as well. And this is great when there's multiple people or elements in the scene, because this allows you to focus in your viewer's attention on which character is important at that moment while still being able to take in what's going on around them. And this next scene is very similar, where we're using a shallow depth of field to focus in on M, but we can still see our assistant in the background noticing that they're running low on time. And another thing we see in the scene is the focus is on whoever's speaking.
Inquiry begins in 30 minutes.
I want to know what's on that computer.
In this scene, a shallow depth of field is being used in order to focus in on an object that's revealing new information in our scene. It's being revealed that the bad guy knows about his wife, and then we shift to the bad guy as he starts speaking.
Angel Hunt. If you try to warn her, she dies.
And then as the villain's finishing talking, we see that he looks at the picture and we shift focus back to the picture again. Now let's move on to some scenes using a narrower aperture in order to get a deeper depth of field. A deep depth of field is often used in these wider establishing shots in order to show your audience where they are, to give them a feel of what's going on in the surroundings before you start to dive into those scenes and get close-ups to show what's going on with each of your characters. And this scene is similar, where we have a wide establishing shot with a deep depth of field in order to give the audience a sense of where we are and what's going on in the scene. And even as the camera moves in closer to the main character, it keeps that deep depth of field so you can understand the environment he's in and see what's going on around him. Another time I see a deep depth of field being used is when there are multiple characters, such as this shot of the Avengers, where we're moving around them and want to be able to see what each one is doing during the shot. And the same here, as we're moving in closer, we want to see each of them and the surroundings of what's going on. So now let's look at some scenes that use both the shallow and deep depth of field in various shots throughout the scene. So here we have James Bond standing on top of a rooftop looking out over the city with a deep depth of field establishing where we are in the scene. And then we move to a shallower depth of field as Moneypenny walks up to him. We're focused on James, and once he notices she's there, the focus shifts to her and then remains on her as she walks up until she begins speaking to him.
Wow.
And this scene is similar. We start out with a wide establishing shot with a deep depth of field to show our audience where we are. Then we move to this somewhat shallower depth of field. As you can see, the fence post is blurry. And then as we're behind the Avengers, it's a deep depth of field so everyone's in view. And then moving here, we have a shallower depth of view, but not so shallow that we can't see each of the characters as they're walking together. And then we move back to a deeper depth of field as they're all walking into the house. Again here, we start with a wide establishing shot showing a confrontation about to happen, then we move into a shallow depth of field to show he's ready to fight. So here's one more scene where we start out with a wide establishing shot, deep depth of field showing what's going on in the room as a waitress brings a drink that was just poisoned. Then we move to a close-up with a shallower depth of field showing him drink that drink that was just poisoned, and then also showing the bad guy watching him drink that drink. We move back to a deep depth of field to show the play that's going on, back to our villain to see the poison start to work, back to a deeper depth of field showing him getting uncomfortable, and then we move to this point. So we have a shallow depth of field with a focus on James Bond, Now the focus shifts to the drink, and now we know that he realized that he was poisoned. And here the aperture and focus is being used to make it more dramatic to enhance that fact, showing that he knows that he was poisoned. So what we can see from a lot of these examples is that the close-ups tend to have a shallower depth of field while the wides have that deeper depth of field. But remember that there's no rule and you don't have to do it this way. Just keep in mind that variety is important in filmmaking, and you don't want to just crank your aperture as wide as it can go and have a really shallow depth of field for every shot. So as you're watching movies or shows, start to take note of the different scenes and how depth of field is being used throughout them. So then when you get to filming and see what shots could benefit from a deeper depth of field or shallower depth of field, figure out how you can craft all that together to better tell your story in that scene. And it would really help out if you could like this video, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you soon.